understand that repetition is not punishment. And this probably sounds like a message you'd want to share with your son as well, that the only path to mastery in anything is repetition, repetition, repetition. It's, I think Tony Robbins said, repetition is the mother of all skill. If you don't have a high level of self-awareness, then most of the stuff either doesn't matter or you'll never be able to maximize it. And we can look at self-awareness through a few different lenses, but self-awareness, I firmly believe, is the most important characteristic for any leader. Everything should be done in service. And when you do, and that's really should be the foundation of every business. I mean, ultimately, you're not selling anything. You shouldn't be selling a product or a service. What you're doing is solving a problem for someone. And when you're solving a problem for them, in essence, you're serving them. You're making their life better based on your product or service.
And that is coming up next on Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show, so stay tuned. So, the big question is this. How are ambitious people like us, who don't have a lot of resources, did not go to Ivy League colleges, were not born into wealth, how do we become resourceful enough? Use our creativity, our dedication, and a little bit of crazy to bootstrap our way to realizing our dreams. Whether it is launching a new company, launching a new app, or making it to the top of the corporate ladder. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. We have created a tremendous community of bootstrappers, entrepreneurs, and professionals who are ambitious, resourceful, and want to get things done. We brainstorm, support, and help each other out. So come join us. Navigate to bootstrapping.group, join today, and get the Startup Founders Technology Accelerator video series absolutely free. If you enjoy this video, then do let us know by hitting that like button now. Or if you want us to improve our content, then go ahead and hit that thumbs down button and give us your honest feedback in the comment section below. Here at Tetanoodle, we are passionate about entrepreneurship, technology, and innovation. Every week, we bring you insightful and engaging videos, interviews, tips, tricks, and strategies to help you grow your business or rise in your corporate profession. If you're new here, please do consider subscribing and do not forget to hit that bell icon so that you are notified when we publish new content. Hello and welcome to this new episode of Bootstrapping Your Dreams Show. I'm your host Manuj Aggarwal, and today we'll be talking with Alan Stein Jr. Alan is a keynote speaker and author who spent more than 15 years as a performance coach working with the highest performing basketball players on the planet. He now teaches audiences how to utilize the same strategies in business that elite athletes use to perform at a world-class level. Alan specializes in improving individual and organizational leadership, performance, and accountability. He inspires and empowers everyone he works with to take immediate action and improve mindset, habits, and productivity, which is what makes him one of the top motivational speakers you'll ever hear. So I'm so excited to have you, Alan. Welcome.
No, I'm equally excited. Thank you so much for having me. We'll have a good conversation.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Now, let's start with your NBA career. Tell us, how did that start, and walk us down the memory lane, share some interesting stories, because a lot of people are fascinated by this sport, especially with NBA. So I'd love to hear your experiences about it.
Sure. Yeah. Most of my expertise was at the youth and high school level, but I was so fortunate to work at two high schools here in the greater Washington, D.C. area that ended up producing combined over a dozen guys in the NBA, players like Kevin Durant, Victor Oladipo, another NBA All-Star. So what's kind of neat about my journey is I spent a lot of time seeing the before picture. I got a chance to meet these future NBA stars when they were 14, 15 years old. And I got to see what it took for them to climb that ladder and to achieve that success. And then working with those two schools got me opportunities with Nike and with Jordan Brand and with USA Basketball. And I got to work some events for them, and I got to observe some of the best players in the world, Kobe Bryant and LeBron James. And so then I got to see the after picture. I got a chance to observe players who had already achieved greatness. And that's what I think makes my journey unique, is I've kind of seen both the before and I've seen the after, and of what it takes to perform at a high level. And as you said in my intro, I now take those lessons and principles and strategies and mindsets and disciplines, and I show folks how to translate that to their own lives, to their business, to their parenting, because really performance is performance, no matter what domain we're talking about.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you're absolutely right. You have a unique perspective here because you've seen the before and after. And we all know how, how competitive this area is, this field is. A lot of people want to be in professional sports, but only a handful of them make it. So tell us a little bit about what you can share with us in terms of what are the qualities of these people who actually make it, some common traits, some common characteristics that you can share with us today.
Sure. And before I do that, let me say that the traits that they needed when they were 14 and 15 in order to become NBA superstars are the exact same traits they need to keep doing in order to stay at that superstar status. And it's the same thing in the world of business. What it takes when you have a startup and you're a young entrepreneur, what it takes to get your company on track is the same stuff it will take to continue to scale it and grow it and to continue to have sustainable results. So it's not like you flip a switch and all of a sudden you start doing different stuff. Many of those traits are the same. And one of the most important ones is the concept of mastering the fundamentals. And as Kobe Bryant told me, never getting bored with the basics. In the game of basketball, the basics come down mostly to footwork and to the mechanics of the actual skills of shooting and passing and rebounding and defending and handling the ball. And if you want to be a great player, you have to practice those skills and you have to practice those fundamentals. You have to practice the basic footwork all of the time, because that's the foundation to which the rest of your game will be built. And if you don't have good footwork on a basic move, well, you're never going to have good footwork on a more advanced move. And the same can be said in business and with entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs need to take a look at what are the foundational pillars of their business, of their exact business and of their business philosophy. And then they have to ask themselves, hey, am I working on my footwork regularly? Am I doing the things that I need to do to build this business? Or am I skipping over the basics and trying to chase things that are hot and flashy? And more times than not, when you do that, you're building your business on a house of cards, and it's going to eventually crumble.
Yeah, that's so true. In fact, one of the things that you pointed out, I'm going to have my 10-year-old son listen to, because I've been asking him to get into karate or martial arts, and he says it's boring. So, you're absolutely right. You cannot get bored by basics. And that's a good foundation to form. Now, what about some of the habits that you have observed in these top performing players? Any habits that they that you can share with us?
Most certainly. The two biggest are that they understand that repetition is not punishment. This probably sounds like a message you'd want to share with your son as well, that the only path to mastery in anything is repetition, repetition, repetition. It's, I think Tony Robbins said, repetition is the mother of all skill. And I know firsthand that repetition is the oldest and most effective form of learning on the planet. And I honestly don't think that's going to change anytime soon. And the only reason I know this is through repetition. The only way I've been able to get good at anything, whether it was in the basketball training space or even at writing or speaking, is through repetition. And the great players understand that. And they realize that putting in the reps during the unseen hours, it's what's going to make them the player that they hope to be. And they also understand that it's not about just going through the motions and punching the clock and getting, haphazard or casual reps. In basketball, we say you have to take game shots from game spots at game speed. You need to practice your shooting in the exact same way that you plan to use it during the game. That's the only way you'll get better. And once again, the parallels between basketball and business, there's such high utility and such a high transfer. So the first thing that I've noticed with all high performers is they understand the importance of quality repetitions. And then what kind of piggybacks on that is they're very coachable and they're very open to feedback. They crave to have people in their lives, coaches and teachers and trainers. They want people that are going to help them see their blind spots and to help them get better and refocus the lens and tighten the screws. They want, a coach to be able to say, hey, you're doing a great job, but you need to change the degree of your foot when you make this move. It'll make you even faster. So having the humility to be open and coachable and welcome that type of feedback is another thing. And, these guys, especially at the NBA level, they're so good. They're so accomplished that, yes, they have very high confidence, but they take that confidence and they still have a hint of humility, which allows them to be coachable. The best players I've ever met still know that they can get better. None of them think they've arrived. None of them think I've hit my ceiling. It's downhill from here. Every one of those guys really believes they can continue to get better if they're open to feedback, if they're open to coaching, and if they put in the quality repetitions during the unseen hours.
Yeah. So those are two great points. So let me pick on those two. Now you said that repetition is very important, which I completely agree with. So that also implies that whatever you try to do, you have to absolutely fall in love with it, right? Like otherwise, it's not really possible to commit yourself to that level of degree if you don't love exactly what you're trying to do. Isn't that right?
That's 100% right. And, that's why whenever I'm speaking to young people, and I know young people is a relative term because this is actually good advice for anybody, but it's something I tell my own children who were very young at the time, is you need to find what you love. Like, what are you passionate about? What do you absolutely love to do? But then you also need to find what you're pretty good at. Where do your natural talents lie? And then you need to see where those two things intersect. And wherever those two things intersect, I call that your strength zone. And that's going to be the area where you have the highest chance of not only being successful, but also being happy and fulfilled and figuring those things out. Because clearly, if you love something, but you don't have very much talent or a very high affinity for it, it can still become something you do for fun, and it can still be a hobby. But the chance of you doing at an elite level are probably limited. And then, as you just said so perfectly, even if you have a talent for it, if you don't enjoy it, if you don't want to put in the work during the unseen hours, then the chances are there's no way you're going to be able to put forth the effort required consistently. It just won't be sustainable. And a perfect example of that would be, a kid who's very tall for his age, and every adult says, you need to play basketball because you're tall. You have to play basketball because you're tall. Well, if the kid doesn't like basketball, eventually that flame is going to run out, and he's going to hit a ceiling of what he can become. So I'm so glad you brought that up. The passion is crucial, but also having the self-awareness to know what things you do really well, that's going to be equally as crucial.
Yeah, that's true. So now drawing that parallel into the business world, when I come across certain entrepreneurs, startup founders, when I ask them, what is your passion? Why did you start this company? Or why are you thinking about starting a company? They mostly come up with the same answer, like, I want to make more money. But I do not believe making more money is the true passion that people have. I mean, there's something deeper. So will you agree with that statement, first of all?
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things, a perfect example with being an entrepreneur, you may not have the strongest affinity for the exact niche that you're in, but on a broader scale, if you have a very strong passion for serving people, like if what really brings you joy is adding value to people's lives, well, then that's the passion you have. So whatever it is that you sell, or whatever service or product that you sell, you might not love that near as much as the fact that you simply love serving others. So it's important to be able to know the difference between both, because, many times I'll see a business, a garage door business, I'll see a truck drive by, and I'm thinking, who's really that passionate about garage doors? Probably not that many people. However, people are passionate about serving others. And you know that a garage door, an electric garage door, is a convenience. It's a way to make your home safer. Like, there's other things behind that I could see someone being very passionate about, because what you're doing is you're making someone's life less stressful. You're making their life more convenient, which means they can spend more time with their children. So you might not love garage doors, but you love what selling garage doors or fixing garage doors does for people. And that's the part that you're falling in love with.
Exactly. Yeah. So that shift in your mental thought process about what you are actually doing, I think it helps quite a bit to shift your energy to become more passionate about what you're doing. Right.
Yes, absolutely. And the neat part too is, when you find this point of intersection, it will change over time. As you get older, you'll develop new passions. And you'll also develop new skill sets. And, I'm a living example of that. For almost 20 years, training basketball players was my number one passion, and it was something I was pretty good at. And then a few years ago, I noticed that I started to have an equal affinity for leadership and building culture and helping entrepreneurs. And I also had an equal affinity for professional speaking. And I was fairly decent at those things. So my point of intersection kind of shifted to now most of what I do is corporate speaking. But I'm still in my strength zone. I'm just as passionate about leadership as I used to be about training. I'm just as passionate about professional speaking as I was about training. So if we keep our eyes open, over the course of our life, that point of intersection will more than likely change, and we need to be able to change with it. Because if you stay in something too long, your passion can start to wane. And if you're not working on your game, then your skill sets will wane as well.
Exactly. All right. So I'll combine two questions here. So you brought up a point about coachability, which again, I completely agree with you. A lot of people I come across seem to be too sure of themselves. And I think that works against them in many ways. And to your point, your passions may actually change. So that self-awareness and ability to, understand yourself is also very, very critical in long-term success, right? So will you say those two skills are really important for anybody to be successful?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up. I had a book that came out this past January called Raise Your Game. And the first chapter is on self-awareness. And the reason it's the first chapter is because it's the foundation to which the rest of the house is built. If you don't have a high level of self-awareness, then most of the stuff either doesn't matter or you'll never be able to maximize it. And we can look at self-awareness through a few different lenses, but self-awareness, I firmly believe, is the most important characteristic for any leader. Whether you're a startup entrepreneur, you're a parent, you're a coach, it's vital. And we can look at it a few different ways. The first way is kind of what we've been talking about already, which is you have to know what things you're good at and you have to know what things you're not so good at. You have to know the things that you really like and enjoy, and you need to know the things that you dislike and don't enjoy. You have to know your strengths and your weaknesses. You have to know certainly your goals and your dreams, but you also need to know what are your fears? What are your insecurities? What are the things that really keep you up at night? And as anyone knows who's done that hard internal work, that's not easy to do. To really come face to face with your fears and not just what they are, but why you have them. Why are you insecure in this way? That's some tough work to do, but it's well worth the effort. And then the next level of self-awareness is making sure that the way you view yourself or even view your business is congruent with the way other people see you. And this has nothing to do with trying to pander for someone's approval or affection. But a perfect example would be if I asked you if you were a good listener, and you said, yes, I'm a great listener. And then I went and asked the 4 or 5 people in this world that know you the best. And they all said, oh no, he's an awful listener. Mm-hmm. That would mean you're lacking self-awareness. You view yourself one way, the rest of the world views you differently. It almost sounds, it's fairly humorous, but if I asked you if you're a good listener and you said, no, I'm not a good listener, it's something I need to work on. And then I asked the 5 people closest to you and they said, oh yeah, he's not a very good listener. That's something he needs to work on. That would actually mean you have very high self-awareness because you're aware of your weakness. You're aware of something that's a challenge to you. And that's what's absolutely crucial. And then the last level of self-awareness has to do with being able to manage and regulate our emotions and having a high emotional intelligence to the point where, not only can you recognize when you're angry, but you can figure out the root cause of that anger. And then you can take it a step further and say, okay, I'm feeling angry now, but what's the best way I can utilize this energy or display this anger in a way that's going to move everyone forward? So a perfect example, let's just say you and I work together and you're supposed to turn in a report to me. You're my direct report and you turn in this report or this proposal and you did a really poor job on it. So first of all, I'm kind of irritated by the fact that you turned in poor work. But then I need to ask myself, well, why am I really irritated? Maybe it's because I've told you several times what you needed to do during the proposal and you clearly didn't do it. So now I'm feeling a little insecure that you're being defiant and that you weren't listening and you weren't respecting me. And now it's, the real reason I'm angry doesn't really have anything to do with you. It has to do with me feeling like you're being defiant. So I have a better feeling of that. But then the next step is being able to say, okay, what's the best way that I can communicate my anger to you in a way that we're both going to get what we want, which is higher performance and for you to redo the proposal or the work in a better way. So, I could bring you in and scream at you and yell and shout curse words and demean you. Well, that's probably not going to cause you to perform at a higher level. So that would not be the best way for me to display my anger. Or I could have you come in and sit down and say, hey, I'm a little bit confused. I thought I articulated what I needed you to do. You clearly didn't do it. So I'm not sure. Where did we miss the mark? How did we miscommunicate? Are there some questions that you still have on the expectations of what I had for you? And will you be able to fix this proposal by next Friday? Is that something that's agreeable to you? And is that something that you can do? That's probably going to raise your performance and get you to do the proposal to a much higher level. So that's kind of walking through all the stages of self-awareness. And really, as leaders, that's what our job is. Our job is to get the most and the best out of others. And in order to do that, we have to have the awareness within ourselves to be able to do that with mastery.
Awesome. That's great. Great answer. Thank you so much. And you're painting a very different picture for the basketball coaches than I'm used to from the movies and stuff, because I see them yelling all the time and sort of, having a military regime. So thank you for changing that image for me. And I'm
part of it, what's neat is, and I'm glad you brought that up. Part of it has been, there has actually been a change in the way coaches view that. I mean, you're very correct that, I'm 43 years old. So I played most of my basketball in the 80s and 90s. And even then, which wasn't that long ago, I think it was much more acceptable for coaches to coach through fear and to coach through intimidation and to use curse words and foul language and screaming and yelling and running as punishment as ways to improve performance. But over time, people have learned that that's not how human beings respond best. That, yes, I'm not saying that there's never a time to raise your voice, or there's never a time to do some of those things. But if that's the only tool you have in your toolbox, you're going to be very limited as a coach. And the key to being an effective leader, and this is so true in business, is you have to learn the language that the other person speaks. So if you played for me, if I'm a basketball coach and you played for me, and your last couple of practices have not been very good practices, I need to figure out what's the best way for me to communicate that to you so that the next day you'll practice better. Now, you may respond well to me yelling at you in front of the team, because some people do. But other people, if I yell at you in front of the team, you'll actually feel emasculated and you'll cower and your performance will go down. So as a leader, I have to learn. And with leaders, the more tools you can have in your toolbox, the better. So I need to have an empathy tool. I need to have a compassion tool. Yes, I need to have a stern, loud voice presence tool. But I think many of the coaches back in the day only had one tool, and that was to yell, to curse, and to make you run. And that only worked for some of their players. And the rest of their players, they didn't get the best out of. So as leaders, we have to be prepared to come at this from all angles.
Yeah, very good advice. Now, in your experience, how many people, maybe just rough percentage, how many people are actually self-aware of their own weaknesses and strengths and all the things that you mentioned earlier?
I don't know that I can assign a number to it. And please know that I'm not a cynical person. I'm very positive. I'm very optimistic. I believe in the good in most people. But even with that said, it's my just observation, having been alive for 43 years, that the vast majority of people are not very self-aware. If anything, they know the things that they like to do, and they know the things they're pretty good at, and they know what their dream and hope for. But many of them, that's where they stop. They don't take the time to figure out their fears and their insecurities. Many of them aren't really concerned with whether or not the way they view themselves is the way the rest of the world views them. That's one of the classic definitions of narcissism. And I'm not implying that most people are narcissists, because they're not. But some people are. And that's the classic definition. They view themselves as being much better than the rest of the world views them. And then, of course, this emotionally, to be able to emotionally regulate your feelings is something that I don't see many people have. And a perfect example would be somebody that gets angry for being stuck in traffic. I mean, I live in the Washington, D.C. area. We have traffic all of the time. And you look over and you see someone that's mad and they're honking their horn. Well, that shows me that they have low awareness and low emotional intelligence, because they're letting something outside of their control dictate their own mood and their own feelings. I mean, I don't like being stuck in traffic any more than the next person, but I don't give it the power over me, and I certainly don't allow it to change my mood or my feelings. And an example of that would be, you and I have a meeting today, and I'm sitting in traffic, and I'm going to be a few minutes late to the meeting, and I'm getting angry, and I'm getting irritated, and I'm seething mad, and then I walk into the meeting with you, and I'm still angry and I'm still agitated. And now you say something and it makes me even more pissed off. And, that's not the sign of a good leader. A good leader needs to be much more stable and focus on the things that they can control and learn to let go of the things that they can't.
Yeah, very well said. Now, can you share some strategies that you may have used or you're aware of on how to close that gap of, not being self-aware to getting more self-aware? It's always a slow process, but anything that you can share to help people out.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic is the first step to improving self-awareness. Well, first of all, the very first step is simply having the humility to acknowledge that you're probably not as self-aware as you can be. That you're willing to do some of the hard work. But the next step, which is what I find kind of ironic, is one of the best ways to improve self-awareness is to actually ask the people that are closest to you. So you get an outsider's view. And if you've created a safe environment and you've built trust and connection with people that know you best, then hopefully they can shed some light on some things. And you need to ask for their honesty and say, hey, I know that I'm asking you to tell me some things that are probably tough for you to say. And I'm going to ask you to tell me some things that are probably tough for me to hear. But this is how I'll get better, and be able to say, even if, and this is an exercise I do with leaders and executives all the time, is let's just imagine I'm in a room full of 30 people right now, and you guys are all high-level executives and startup entrepreneurs, and I say, all right, I want you guys to help me generate a list of the 20 traits of the best leaders that you know of. This could be a sport coach you had when you were a kid. It could be somebody famous like a Richard Branson, or it could be someone that you work with or know now. And they start shouting out characteristics. They're accountable, they're inspiring, they're reliable. And you start getting this list, and we whittle it down to 20. And then I say, okay, now we're going to take this list of 20, and I want, on a scale of 1 to 10, I want you to rate yourself on that trait. So how well do you do this thing? And this is your self-awareness. But then I want you to take this list and I want you to give it to 5 people that know you really well. In many cases, if your parents are still alive, they probably know you well. If you've been married for a length of time, they know you well. Maybe you have a best friend that you've had since high school. If you have children that are older than teenagers where they could help with this, they probably know you well. And give them a blank sheet and ask them to rate you on those same traits. And then you simply see how much overlap there is. And we're looking for trends. So I'll just keep using listening as an example. If you rated yourself as an 8 out of 10 on listening, but your wife, your mom, your son, and your neighbor all gave you a 3, well, there's a big disconnect between the way you see yourself and the way they see you. That would probably show me that you're lacking some awareness there, and that's something that would need some work on. Now, because really all we're looking at is trends. I realize that the way you score yourself might be different than the way others assign a score to you. Like you might give yourself 7s on everything, and you're really an 8.5 on everything, but you're just critical of yourself. So we're not worried about that. We're just looking for trends. And that's a way to be able to narrow down a few things. One, it'll narrow down how aware you are. And that's just simply going to be how much harmony is there between the 2 sets of scores. The other is you'll start to see which things you do really, really well. Maybe you're just naturally very empathetic. It's very easy for you to try to see the world through other people's eyes. And you gave yourself a high score, and everyone that knows you gave you a high score. Well, that means being empathetic is one of your strongest powers, whereas something else might be very low. And the most important part of this is it's just data. None of this is, we don't want to look at it as good and bad or right or wrong, but you need to know what things do you do well as a leader and what things do you not do well. And then when you look at the not do well things, you have to decide, is this something that could be delegated, or could I build my team around this? If you are a CEO or a founder and you're low in one of these areas, well, maybe you could bring somebody on staff that's high in that area to help balance out. So if you're not very empathetic, but you bring on a partner that is very empathetic, then the two of you together can hopefully lead much more effectively.
Awesome, that's great. And now you have a unique perspective once again, because you were in the sports business, and now you are coaching executives and entrepreneurs. So can you take a few things that are applicable to sports and also to business, maybe teamwork, maybe as we discussed, passion or whatever, but according to you, whatever are the most important parallels between the sporting world and the business world, and share with us.
Most certainly. The most important one is relationships. If you are a basketball player, you need to have a very strong relationship with yourself, which is everything we just talked about with self-awareness. You need to have a very strong relationship with your teammates, the people that are playing on your team, and you need to have a very strong relationship with your coaching staff. And those three have to be the most important relationships as far as basketball is concerned. I'm not talking about your immediate family or your faith or anything like that, but just as far as basketball, those are the three most important relationships. Well, it's the same thing in business. First, you have to have a strong relationship with yourself. You have to have a very strong relationship with your coworkers and your colleagues. But then you also have to have a strong relationship with your clients and your customers. You have to be able to know them, the people that you're serving. And if you don't have a good relationship with your colleagues and coworkers, and you don't have a good relationship with your clients and customers, then there's going to be a very low ceiling on what you can achieve. So that's one that clearly has high utility. Another is under role clarity. As a basketball player, you need to know exactly what your role is on the team. What position do you play? What are you expected to do? If you're a point guard in basketball, you're more than likely more responsible for bringing the ball up court and distributing it to the other players than you are for rebounding. That's more of your role. It doesn't mean you're not supposed to ever get a rebound, but that's what the team needs you to do for the team to be successful. And it's the same thing in business. Everyone in the organization needs to know their role, needs to embrace their role, and then needs to star in their role. So if you're in the accounting department, you need to focus on the accounting and making that part of the business the best that it can be. You don't need to bother yourself with what's going on in marketing or what's going on with research and development or you don't need to worry with that. If they ask for your input, by all means share, but you need to know your role and do your role to the best of your ability. And if the folks in sales do the same thing, if the executive staff does the same thing, the folks in R&D, if everyone does their role, then when you bring the whole group together, now you've got something really, really special. So I would say off the top of my head, relationships and role clarity are two things that directly go from basketball to business.
Awesome. That's great. And one of the last questions, we are almost over time now, but I want to ask this. So you have said it is impossible to be selfish and serve simultaneously. So can you clarify that for us?
Yeah, I think anytime we're selfish, it's because we're looking inward. We're worried. By definition, we're worried about ourselves and what we have or don't have or what we're doing and not doing. But as soon as you step outside of yourself and you focus on serving others, so you go from being selfish to selfless or unselfish, it's very hard for those two things to coexist. It's very similar it's almost impossible to be angry and grateful at the same time. They're exclusive. If you really sit down and think of, how fortunate I am, I have my health, I have 3 children that I love very much, I have a career that I really enjoy. Like, it's hard to really think of those things and be angry at the same time. And the same thing with selfishness versus serving. But what I do find interesting is I do believe that there is some inherent selfishness in all of us, and we're born that way. Initially as children, as babies, it's a self-preservation mechanism. They have to be concerned with getting food and getting changed and making sure the temperature's right. And if not, then they start to cry because that's the only form of regulation that they have. As we get older, we realize that and I've really realized this once I had kids. That the world is so much bigger than any one of us, and that. If anything were to happen to me, the world just keeps on ticking. And I say that not to diminish myself or diminish my life, but just to put in a hint of humility that, man, it's so much more important to go serve others and fill their buckets than it is to sit around worrying about myself and what do I have or what do I want to do. So yeah, to me, and when I had that shift, because like many people, I was fairly selfish in my teens and in my 20s and even beginning of my 30s. I was more worried about material items and how much money I was making. And I was worried about, things and how they affected me. And as I got older and got more life experience and hopefully more maturity and wisdom, and once I had my own children, I realized, it ain't about me. It's about others. And that's really coaching mantra and parenting mantra 101. And, I firmly believe that the most important part of my legacy will be my 3 children. And if I can help raise and parent 3 children that grow up to be happy, well-adjusted, positive, empathetic, compassionate, tolerant contributors to this world, that's what I want to be known for and remembered for, not, cars or houses or bank accounts, a lot of that stuff that for some reason I thought was much more important when I was younger. So yeah, everything should be done in service. And when you do, and that's really should be the foundation of every business. I mean, ultimately, you're not selling anything. You shouldn't be selling a product or a service. What you're doing is solving a problem for someone. And when you're solving a problem for them, in essence, you're serving them. You're making their life better based on your product or service. And if you can attract the right potential prospect that needs your product or service, then you don't have to convince them to buy anything. It's just a naturally right fit, and business will just transpire organically. And that's all done through service.
Great answer. Now, just quickly, I want to ask one follow-up question there. So I see that happening quite a bit. Like, people are selfish in the first part of their lives, and then they have some success in their career, they have kids. So do you think this is just the natural progression because we don't know what we don't know, and we are brought up in a society which is more materialistic, but as we progress through life, we tend to learn things and we start to shift. Is that your experience as well, or?
Yeah, I absolutely believe that if we just speak in generalities, that most people tend to be more selfish when they're younger. Most people tend to be less self-aware when they're younger, and with age and life experience. Because one thing life experience will do is it will humble you. You will get dumped by a girlfriend. You will get cut from a team. Your startup will go bankrupt. You'll lose a job. You'll get sick. I mean, there's so many things that can happen as you gain life experience that will humble you. And if you've ever talked to anyone that's really, say hit rock bottom, they get really, really sick, what they always end up saying is it reframed their perspective and they kind of know what's important. So they say, I spent all this time working 80 hours a week and chasing the dollar. And then when I got sick, I realized that's not near as important as my family and having a good connection with my kids. So it takes that to kind of reframe that. And the longer you live on this planet, the more times you're going to hit those big speed bumps. So I think it's natural for those things to unfold. But of course, as parents and leaders in the community, we should be doing our best to try to teach and model these things for kids so that they start to learn them younger. As I mentioned, I was probably in my early 30s before the light bulb went off for me. So as a parent, can I model behavior and hold my kids accountable and plant seeds with them so maybe they come to that epiphanal moment, in their late teens or early 20s, and I save them a decade?
Yeah. That's amazing. I'm sure. I hope I will be able to schedule another interview with you, just focusing on parenting, and that'll be an interesting conversation.
I would love that. Well, I'll tell you this, and I would love to come back on and talk parenting. But one of the things I find so neat. Most of the stuff we've talked about, we've been looking through the lens of either basketball or business, but it's almost all the same stuff when it comes to parenting. One of the reasons I really enjoy this work is because of how high of the utility it is. Everything I've done to become a better basketball trainer has helped me in business, but it's also helped me be a better father. Everything I've done to get better at speaking and at writing has actually helped me become a better father. So these things are definitely not mutually exclusive, which means we should all be investing in our own leadership. We should be investing in our own development, because we're going to be able to reap those benefits in every single area of our life. And, if you show me someone that is running a company with empathy and compassion, someone that has high self-awareness, someone that really truly serves the people that work for them and the clients they serve, I'm pretty willing to bet that bleeds over into their parenting as well.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you so much for this very interesting and enlightening conversation. I think you've given us a lot of good strategies and a lot of food for thought. And I think it's going to help everyone in the audience tremendously. Thank you so much. Now, before I let you go, can you tell us how people can reach out to you?
Yeah, gladly. No, and I appreciate you led a great conversation, and this was a lot of fun. If anyone's interested in my book, Raise Your Game, you can go to raiseyourgamebook.com. You can just, get an individual copy on Amazon or on Audible if you prefer audiobooks, or you can also order in bulk for your team or organization. I can give you up to a 42% discount off the cover price, and I can pre-sign every single copy before they ship out if anyone wants to get their whole team on board. And I'm also about to launch a book study program that will go along with the book that will help leaders take the principles from the book and actually put them into use and to implement them. And then if anyone's interested in my speaking or social media or anything else I've got going on, they can just go to alansteinjr.com, and I'm at Alan Stein Jr. on LinkedIn, Instagram, all of the major social platforms.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your knowledge and wisdom. Thanks.
Thank you.
And that's all for now. Until next time. Now, if you're an entrepreneur or a career professional, then I invite you to join our growing community. Navigate to bootstrapping.group. As a welcome bonus, you will get the Startup Founders Technology Accelerator video series and Mastering Your Inner Game video series absolutely free. This series of short videos address some core issues which are instrumental in helping you move forward in your business or career. The videos are yours to view and share for free. No obligations or strings attached. Except for one, you have to take action and implement it. So join us today, navigate to bootstrapping.group. If you want more engaging videos and insightful interviews with industry's thought leaders, then check out the other videos we have picked for you. The link is right there. And if you want to be notified about our new content, please do consider subscribing to our channel.